By now, you probably know a lot about Squadrons before even getting your hands on the game. Perhaps this is the next big game for you to get stuck in with your friends, and thus requires a much bigger investment. Many who dedicate themselves to online focused games tend to spend income on cosmetics that release in their game via microtransactions. But with Star Wars Squadrons, that's not the case, as EA Motive Studios have clearly stated there will be no extra purchasable content upon release. So, with no extra cosmetics to buy, what better way to improve your experience in Squadrons than VR? For me, I've always been a bit of an advocate for VR since it first launched. I myself pledged to Oculus Rift on Kickstarter back in 2012, and I still have my DK1 version today, and guess what? It still works within Steam. I got the device out last year and was able to try out some games that supported its limited tracking. VR chat was definitely the most interesting and immersive. Unfortunately, the DK1 only tracks the turning of your head on one point. You're unable to move your head around, which was a feature introduced into DK2. Plus, the cables are a genuine nightmare, but we'll come back to this later. Today, we're exploring what would be the best VR headset for you to use in Star Wars Squadrons, whilst also keeping an eye on its extra functionality, build quality, longevity, pricing, and more. But for those who missed it, in our previous video, we took a closer look at an interview with the Squadron's creative director, Ian Fraser, who said players using VR headsets as a rebellion faction will have a peripheral vision advantage, especially with pilots in the A-Wing. So for those who want to get a true feel for the cockpit, VR headsets are an absolute must. But before we go through all the VR devices, my question of the day is, will you be using VR headsets in Squadrons? For me, I'm a little mixed. I will absolutely be playing Squadrons in VR, but on a competitive standard with the EcksToo, I'm not sure. I suffer from double vision, so 3D effects are not as effective for me, and can cause migraines on long usage. So we'll have to see. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read all of them and try to get back to some of you too. Now, on with the video. Just a little footnote for new VR users, there are 3 aspects to VR headsets you want to take note of. Refresh rate, which is how fast the screen refreshes. The higher it is, the less smearing and blurriness you get when moving your head. Also good to reduce motion sickness. The resolution, which shows how clear the picture is. Low resolution means you'll be able to see the pixels in the panel, not great. And the FOV, meaning how much of the screen you can see at once. The limits of the human vision is 220 FOV, so bear that in mind. But onwards with the Oculus Rift S, coming in at $399, an 80Hz refresh rate, 1280 by 1440 resolution, and 110 FOV. It's definitely one of the cheapest headsets out there. It comes packed with 2 controllers and the headset itself, with 1 cable that splits at the end for DisplayPort and USB connections. That's it. No camera or sensor setup. It's definitely the go-to headset for users who want PC tethered VR experiences and for the price. It's definitely a no-brainer for budget VR enthusiasts that want a fantastic experience whilst playing Squadrons. The most popular headset of them all, the Oculus Quest, coming in at $399, a 72Hz refresh rate, 1440 by 1660 resolution, and roughly 100 FOV. For those who don't know, the Oculus Quest is a truly wireless headset. No cables needed, as most of the computing power is in the headset itself. This does mean the headset runs on battery power when using the headset for the Quest supported games in their online library of games. You will, however, need to connect it via a Quest link to play PC games like Squadrons. The cable itself does a good job at transferring data to the headset, and better yet, it doesn't require any camera or sensor setup in the house. Also, modders and developers have created an app called ALVR that allows you to play PC games with your Quest without any cables. This is the only way to play Squadrons with absolutely no cables at all at a budget, but unfortunately, the battery life will only last for 2 hours of play. Plus, you'll see some tethering on the screen and some form of ghosting too when moving your head fast, as there is only so much data that can be wirelessly sent to your device, which may or may not be the most optimal setting for people who want to play Squadrons competitively. And whilst the specs are slightly lower than Oculus Rift S for the same price, you're getting a fully wireless experience, with hand tracking technology as well. Next up is the HTC Vive, a relatively older model of VR that launched in 2016. Starting at $399, 1080 by 1200 resolution, 90Hz refresh and 110 FOV, it shares very similar stats to the Oculus line, despite being older. The resolution, however, is much lower and noticeable in comparison. but the panel itself is OLED, a much more reactive, faster panel than the LCDs used in Quest and Rift S. These do require sensor mounts, meaning there is some setup required in your room. Whilst the Vive might be more accurate with its sensors rather than inside-out tracking of the Oculuses we've mentioned before, Squadron players are likely to want higher FOV and resolution for the most out of their gameplay, as many Squadron VR players will be using controllers or custom joysticks. The HTC Vive Pro is being lumped into this section too, as it shares the same refresh and FOV, but has a high resolution at 1440 by 1600, as well as a super responsive AMOLED display at a whopping $1,100 or $800 with just the headset. Whilst a nifty upgrade, this price and specs are again likely not what Squadron players are wanting. A bit of a dark horse this one, the HP Reverb. Starting at $599, it has 2160 by 2160 resolution, 90Hz refresh and 114 FOV. A pretty impressive lineup of specs, but roughly $200 more. The reason I'm putting this one on the list is that many users don't want to have to upgrade their computers to get the very best VR headsets. It's a lot of money. HP Reverb feels like it's the very best headset you can get for the GTX line of cards without having to upgrade to the RTX series for a higher refresh rate and so on. Plus, the one thing that really makes this headset stand out is the resolution. You're seeing a large boost in visual quality that makes simulation games like Squadrons really shine. If your PC is running something like a GTX 1080 and you don't want to pay for a GPU upgrade, HP Reverb might be for you. But just a heads up though, the higher resolution requires a DisplayPort plugin instead of a HDMI, so double check your PC has an available port ready. Moving on to the current generation of headsets, the HTC Vive Cosmos sports 1440 by 1700 resolution, 90Hz refresh and 110 FOV at $699. But with the inclusion of the HP Reverb previously, there isn't much reason to go with the Vive Cosmos, especially when it's $100 more than the competition, as well as customers complaining about tracking issues with their Vives in the past. For Squadron players, unless you've already had a good experience with the Vive line in the past, perhaps the HP Reverb is better for seated gameplay. Valve Indexed is up next, offering far better stats. 1440 by 1600 resolution, 144Hz refresh rate, and 130 FOV at a whopping $1,000. It comes with tracking stations and controllers, so there is a setup, but the refresh rate and the far higher FOV makes it absolutely amazing for simulation gameplay like Squadrons. The catch is that refresh rates like these, as well as the FOV, does require top of the line graphics cards. So if you're not using the latest RTX line of cards, you're not going to get the most out of this device. Most of all, it's really expensive and only really made for true enthusiasts of VR gaming. If you're only going to buy a VR headset for Squadrons, Valve Index definitely feels like too much for just one game. And with the resolution not being as high as the HP Reverb, you've got to make sure that you're using this device for all it's got, and not just seated simulation games. Pimax 8KX is our final purchasable headset that is going to blow your mind. 3840 by 2160 resolution, 75Hz refresh, and a crazy 200 FOV at an insane $1,800, or $1,300 without the controllers or Steam VR stations. This is definitely the highest resolution headset on the market, and the reason for the lower refresh rate is purely because it's physically impossible right now to run two 4K panels above 90Hz refresh. You absolutely need to make sure you're running the best graphics card in your computer for something like this. And the insanely high resolution makes simulation seated gameplay truly incredible. Super high resolutions like this will make seeing enemies in the distance super easy to see. The wild 200 FOV starts reaching the limits of the human vision, and thus you will see some sort of distortion at the end of the panels. But peripheral vision and looking at the cockpit HUDs will be an absolute breeze for anyone using this headset. This type of station is built for games like Squadrons, but are purely for people who can burn a hole in their pocket and survive it. Now onto some honourable mentions. For people running Squadrons on the PS4, PlayStation VR is definitely viable. 960 by 1080 resolution, 90 to 120 Hz refresh, and 100 FOV at $299 makes this the cheapest headset of the lot. The reason for the uncertain refresh rate is that we don't know what FPS Squadrons will run on with the PS4 or PS5. The VR headset certainly tries to fix anything below 120, but we'll have to wait and see. Whilst the resolution warrants this headset not truly viable for competitive, high-level play in Squadrons, it definitely makes any form of casual play a lot of fun. And finally, do you have one of those DK1 or DK2 headsets from Oculus Rift lying around? With the Oculus DK1 headset, you get 640 by 800 resolution, 60 Hz, and 110 FOV. Definitely primitive in the resolution, and it is totally noticeable. But if you just want to experience VR on a basic form, it's definitely an option. As for picking one up, however, not many are being sold. Some go for about $100 to $150 if you're lucky and in the US, but I'll definitely be using mine in Squadrons when it comes out. Perhaps I can make a video on that too if you guys want that as well. But finally guys, that does wrap up our video for the day. Of course, our question of the day is, will you be using VR headsets in Squadrons? And if so, which one will you be thinking to go for? And as always, if you love all things Star Wars, Squadrons, or just myself, Eckhartsladder and Corey Losers messing about in games like Fall Guys or Sea of Thieves, definitely hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. And if you're looking at one of our swanky shirts, definitely pick one up on our Teespring link in the description down below. And if that's not enough, we also have some really cool perks for people on our newly launched Patreon. Things from newsletters to playing games with us and more. Check that out in the description down below as well. And finally, I have been Charlie, you've been watching EcksToo, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.